That night, Ryan thought nothing worse could happen. He just wanted to enjoy the party in peace. But he had no idea that every glance, every laugh, would make him feel even smaller. Yet destiny had something in store that no one there could have imagined. Ryan took a deep breath before stepping into the brightly lit mansion. Laughter echoed inside, the clinking of glasses, soft music playing, and he stood at the doorway trying to look calm. He was nervous. The simple outfit he wore, a light blue shirt and worn dress pants, clashed with the expensive suits and sparkling dresses parading around. As soon as he took his first step in, all eyes turned to him like a stranger had invaded their territory. For a moment, Ryan thought about turning back, but something inside told him to stay. He walked slowly, trying to smile, but it felt forced. Conversations quieted when he passed, then resumed with muffled giggles. A cousin whispered something, and the others laughed. Ryan pretended not to hear. With every step, the marble floor felt slipperier, the air heavier. He looked for a corner to hide in, but there was nowhere. Everything there seemed to shine, except him. And deep inside, a voice repeated, "You shouldn't have come." The smell of expensive perfume, the champagne glasses, the exaggerated laughter, none of it felt like his world. He was used to the quiet of the small room he shared with his mother, the sound of rain tapping the window, not this glittering fake world. Watching his relatives laugh and hug, he remembered the stories his mother told about his father, the only one who ever treated him as special. Ryan swallowed hard, trying to convince himself that the night wouldn't be as bad as it seemed. But just one joke shattered the little confidence he had. One aunt, wearing a fake smile, said loudly, "Look who decided to show up. The rebel son." Everyone laughed. Ryan forced a smile, pretending he was fine. Inside, his chest burned. He didn't know what hurt more, the contempt in their eyes or the mocking tone in their voices. He tried to stay calm, but he could feel his face getting hot, his heart racing. Every second felt like an eternity. Amid all the opulence, he felt out of place. The lights reflected off the silverware, and he thought how unfair it all was. This place should have been his too. His grandfather had built it all, yet he and his mother had been left aside after his father's death. Now he was there, facing a family that pretended he didn't exist, but for some reason, something inside him whispered that tonight would be different. He approached the dining table, grabbed a glass of water and tried to blend in, but it was impossible. Everyone else seemed perfectly in place. A blonde girl laughed when the glass almost slipped from his hand. "Careful not to break anything, cousin. Everything here is expensive," she said, her look a mix of sarcasm and disdain. Ryan forced a laugh, but it came out shaky. It hurt more than he wanted to admit. Trying to distract himself, he glanced around and noticed old photos on the wall. One caught his attention, his father, young and smiling, standing next to his grandfather. For a moment, Ryan forgot everything and felt a lump in his throat. It was as if his father was still there, telling him not to give up, to stay strong. He took a deep breath and looked back at the ballroom. The laughter resumed, its sound pushing him further away. Suddenly, an older man, the most arrogant uncle in the family, approached with a forced smile. "Ah, Ryan, long time no see. Still working at that little place, huh?" Ryan responded with a barely audible yes, trying to keep his composure. The uncle laughed loudly, as if it were the funniest thing in the world. And while everyone watched, Ryan simply lowered his eyes, not knowing that in just a few hours the whole game would turn completely around. Flashbacks hit Ryan like sudden waves. He remembered the quiet days with his mother, the evenings spent talking about his father, the man who had always treated him like he mattered. They had been pushed aside after his father's death, left out of family events and celebrations. The mansion, the parties, the wealth. It all seemed like a world they had no right to enter. And yet, tonight, Here he was, walking into the very place that had ignored them for years. He recalled his father's warm smile, the way he made Ryan feel like the most important person in the room, no matter who else was there. His mother's voice echoed in his memory, telling him stories of courage, kindness, and dignity. "Remember who you are, Ryan. Don't let anyone make you feel small," she would say. That voice had been his guide, his secret strength. It kept him moving forward when the world seemed determined to push him down. The mansion loomed around him now, glittering and luxurious. But in his mind, the old house by the riverside, with its small garden and creaky floors, was the real home. That was where he learned patience, humility, and the importance of kindness. Here, everything was different. Polished floors, sparkling chandeliers, expensive wines. People wore masks that gleamed brighter than any jewel. And Ryan had to navigate a world that never felt like his. He remembered the letters his father used to write him, short notes tucked into lunchboxes or hidden under pillows. They were always full of encouragement, lessons on how to treat people, and reminders that true worth isn't measured in money. Ryan clutched that memory tightly, feeling a warmth amid the cold stares and whispers of the present. Those words were more valuable than any inheritance he could imagine. Tonight, the whispers and sideways glances from the family felt sharper, but he let the memories anchor him. He remembered the last hug from his father, the reassurance in his eyes, the belief that Ryan could face anything. The mansion around him might have been full of wealth, but it lacked the honesty, the love, and the guidance his father had given him. And that was something money could never buy. As he moved through the crowd, flashes of old family photos came to mind, images of relatives he barely knew, smiling for the camera while Ryan and his mother were absent from every frame. A bitter taste surfaced in his mouth, but he swallowed it. He had learned to survive without recognition. Tonight, he would survive again, but something deep inside hinted that tonight could be different. Even the familiar sting of ridicule felt different now. He wasn't the same timid boy from years ago. The memories of his father, the lessons learned with his mother, and the quiet strength he had built inside gave him a shield. He could feel it wrapping around him, protecting him from the cold glares, the sarcastic smiles, and the whispered jokes. It was a quiet power, one that no laughter could break. And as he took another slow step toward the party, Ryan realized something. The past might have been forgotten by the family, but he hadn't forgotten it. And that memory, that love, that guidance would carry him through tonight, no matter what the family said or did. Somewhere in the shadows of the ballroom, the boy who once felt invisible was ready to take his place, even if no one there yet understood his worth. The laughter hit him like ice. As Ryan walked further into the ballroom, a cousin whispered something under his breath, and the others erupted into laughter. The words didn't matter. The tone did. It was sharp, mocking, and full of that casual cruelty that stung more than any outright insult. Ryan forced himself to smile, a tight, awkward curve of his lips, pretending nothing had happened. Inside, his chest tightened, his heartbeat quickened, and a lump formed in his throat. A small group of cousins gathered near the center of the room, their eyes following his every move. "Oh, look at him, trying to fit in," one of them sneered. The others giggled, pointing subtly at his worn clothes, the way he held himself a little too stiffly. Ryan's fingers brushed against the fabric of his shirt, wishing it were smoother, shinier, anything to make him invisible. But invisibility wasn't an option tonight. He was on display, a spectacle for every amused eye. Aunt Margaret, smiling too wide, leaned over to whisper something to her friends. Ryan caught a fragment. "The poor thing. Can't even keep up." Laughter bubbled around her, sharp and biting. He looked down at his shoes, at the marble floor reflecting the chandelier's light, and felt like he was sinking into it. The grand room, the sparkling glasses, the music, all of it seemed to highlight how out of place he was. And yet, he walked on, step by careful step, gripping his own courage. One of the younger cousins nudged another, pointing at Ryan. Does he even know how to act at a party? They laughed again, loud enough for him to hear. Ryan forced a chuckle that came out shaky, his teeth clenched tight. He told himself not to care. He had survived worse. But the constant whispers, the sideways looks, the soft, cruel laughter wore him down with each passing second. Every eye on him reminded him that tonight he was the outsider. Trying to find a safe space, Ryan glanced at the corners of the room. Everywhere he looked, people were in their little cliques, laughing, sipping champagne, congratulating each other. He felt a pang of loneliness, sharp and immediate. He remembered the quiet evenings at home, the gentle voice of his mother, the safe little world they'd built. Nothing here felt safe, nothing here felt real. It was all glitter, smoke, and judgment. A cousin made a dramatic gesture, imitating the way Ryan had nervously adjusted his sleeve. The group burst into another round of laughter. Ryan clenched his fists at his sides, biting back the urge to respond. He wanted to disappear, to melt into the background, but he couldn't. Something inside him held firm. A quiet voice repeating his father's lessons. Keep your head high. Show who you are by being yourself. He continued forward, each step heavier than the last. The laughter faded into the background as he focused on a distant point, the portrait of his father on the wall, young, confident, smiling beside his grandfather. That image reminded him of where he came from, who had taught him strength and dignity. The whispers and mockery didn't vanish, but they no longer had the same power. Ryan's spine straightened just a fraction, his jaw set, ready to face whatever came next. And yet, the first mockery left its mark. Every giggle, every snicker, every pointed glance reminded him of how little he had been considered. But Ryan also realized something. If the night went on like this, he had a choice. He could let them break him, or he could survive and turn the tables later. And somewhere deep inside, he felt the stirring of a plan, a sense that the story wasn't over, not by far. The tension in the room thickened like fog. Ryan tried to stay calm, walking slowly past clusters of laughing relatives, but the next joke hit harder than the last. Someone knocked over a glass near him on purpose, spilling champagne onto his worn pants. Laughter erupted, louder this time, cutting through the soft music and filling every corner of the room. Ryan froze, staring at the stain, his face burning. He wanted to vanish. A cousin leaned in, whispering something cruel about his job, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "Still working that little cafe, huh? Must be exciting," he sneered. Ryan's lips pressed together, a mix of embarrassment and anger bubbling inside. He tried to ignore it, telling himself it didn't matter, but the words dug in, scraping at his confidence. Every laugh, every glance, every whispered comment felt like a spotlight on his insecurities. He gripped the edge of a table, trying to steady himself. The silverware glinted, the chandeliers sparkled, and the music continued as if nothing had happened. Yet for Ryan, everything was distorted, heavier, more suffocating. Each laugh felt like it bounced off the walls and lodged itself in his chest. He could feel the weight of their judgment pressing down, and for a moment he thought he might collapse under it. Clara, standing nearby, noticed his discomfort and moved closer, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Hey, don't let them get to you," she whispered softly. Ryan nodded, grateful, but the embarrassment lingered, clawing at him. The room around him was a dazzling, cruel stage, and he was the unwilling performer. Every insult, every joke was a reminder of how little he had been expected to belong here. Aunt Margaret laughed at something she didn't even fully hear, pointing in his direction. The room erupted again, voices overlapping in teasing and ridicule. Ryan's stomach twisted. He took a deep breath, trying to focus on something solid. The portrait of his father smiling from the wall, the faint scent of his mother's perfume on his own shirt, the grounding voice in his head reminding him he was stronger than this moment. The tension didn't ease, it thickened. Guests whispered among themselves, glancing at Ryan with smirks and judgment. He felt their eyes on him, measuring, mocking. Each step he took seemed heavier than the last, as if the marble floor itself had turned against him. He considered leaving, running away from the humiliation, but some stubborn part of him refused. He couldn't let them see him break. Not yet. He adjusted his shirt nervously, trying to regain composure. The laughter continued, relentless, a wave crashing over him again and again. Ryan's jaw tightened, his chest heaving slightly. He could feel his heartbeat in his ears, loud, demanding, reminding him that he was alive, still standing, still capable of enduring. He told himself, just a little longer, stay strong. Something will change. As he moved through the crowd, the tension seemed to push him forward, paradoxically fueling a quiet fire inside. This wasn't just about surviving the night. It was about proving, to himself at least, that he could endure their ridicule. And somewhere deep down, a sense of inevitability whispered the tables would turn. Tonight wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Amid the whispers and laughter, a familiar face approached Ryan. Clara, his kind-hearted cousin, stepped forward, her expression a mix of concern and quiet defiance. "Hey," she said softly but firmly, placing a hand gently on his arm. "You don't deserve this." Ryan looked at her, surprise flashing across his face. Her words were simple, but in the middle of the mocking crowd, they felt like a shield, a lifeline. The cousins and aunts nearby glanced at Clara, some rolling their eyes, others pretending not to notice. "Oh, so now someone's defending him?" a cousin sneered. Clara didn't flinch. "Yes, because he's not your joke," she replied, calm yet unshakable. Ryan felt a warmth in his chest he hadn't known he needed. For the first time that night, someone on the inside was on his side. Someone who could see him, not just the caricature the family had made of him. Ryan gave a small, nervous smile, almost imperceptible, but it was enough. He whispered a quiet thanks to Clara, the words carrying the weight of relief and gratitude. Even with her support, the room was still hostile, still buzzing with ridicule, but her presence made the mockery bearable. For a moment he could breathe, feel his heart slow just slightly, and know he wasn't entirely alone. Clara's intervention didn't stop the laughter entirely. Aunts continued their whispers, cousins smirked, and the uncle who had been mocking him leaned back, shaking his head in disbelief. But something had shifted. The balance of power was slightly altered, if only in perception. Ryan's confidence, fragile as it was, started to return bit by bit. He realized that support, even from one ally, could make a world of difference. The more Ryan observed Clara standing her ground, the more courage he drew. He straightened his posture, taking a deep breath. The fire that had been simmering inside him since he entered the mansion began to stir. He didn't feel strong, not yet, but he felt something even more important, a sense of validation. Someone saw him for who he truly was, and that recognition was priceless. Clara whispered just for him, "Remember what your father taught you. Don't let them define you." Ryan closed his eyes for a brief moment, letting her words sink in. The memory of his father's smile and encouragement filled him with determination. The insult-filled room didn't disappear, but he felt his own center solidifying. For the first time that night, he felt he could face the storm ahead. A cousin tried to make another joke, glancing at Ryan with the same mocking expression, but Clara stepped subtly closer, a quiet signal that he wasn't alone. The cousin faltered, caught off guard by her quiet defiance. Ryan noticed this small victory, a tiny crack in the wall of ridicule surrounding him. His heart lifted slightly, enough to feel hope stir inside. Ryan looked at Clara and nodded subtly, a silent acknowledgement. He was ready to endure the rest of the night, knowing that someone stood by him. The laughter would continue, the judgment would persist, but he felt the first hint of inner strength, a flicker that promised the tides could turn. And somewhere deep inside, he knew that night, full of humiliation, wasn't over, but the story was far from finished. Suddenly, the room fell into a hush as the patriarch of the family, Ryan's grandfather, entered the ballroom. His presence commanded attention, and the chatter died down immediately. Everyone turned, eyes wide, sensing something important was about to happen. Ryan felt his chest tighten, anticipation mixed with nervousness. The whispers and mocking looks seemed to fade in the presence of this imposing figure. The grandfather's gaze swept over the room, stopping briefly on each family member. "Quiet, please," he said, his voice firm but calm. The words carried authority, and even the most arrogant cousins straightened in their seats. Ryan watched, his heart pounding, unsure of what was coming next. The air seemed charged, heavy with expectation. Something big was about to unfold, and everyone knew it. He continued, his tone deliberate. "Tonight, I have an announcement that will affect this entire family. It is time to reveal the rightful heir to the fortune." Gasps echoed softly through the room. Some guests exchanged nervous glances, others held their breath. The music had stopped, the clinking of glasses silenced. Even the mocking cousins seemed frozen, unsure of what to expect. Ryan's eyes widened as the grandfather's gaze finally rested on him. There was a pause, deliberate and tense, before the words came. "Ryan, the grandson who has maintained the values and kindness of his late father, is the one I have chosen." The room went still, as if time had stopped. Ryan felt a jolt of disbelief mixed with awe. Could this be real? The whispers, the laughter, everything seemed to vanish. The cousins who had mocked him barely dared to breathe. Faces that had been full of derision were now pale with shock. Aunt Margaret's fake smile faltered, her lips pressed tightly together. Even the uncle who had ridiculed his job seemed frozen, staring as if he hadn't believed his ears. The revelation hung in the air like a weight, heavy and undeniable. Ryan stood, stunned, his heart racing. A mix of relief, disbelief, and a faint thrill coursed through him. The room that had seemed so hostile now felt surreal, like a stage frozen mid-scene. He caught Clara's eye and saw the faintest smile, reassuring him that this was real. He had been seen, truly, and the moment was electric with tension and anticipation. The grandfather continued, his voice calm but resonant. "This is not just about wealth, but about character, loyalty, and respect. Ryan embodies these qualities. He has waited patiently, and now it is his time." Every word sank deep into Ryan's chest, fueling a growing sense of validation and justice. The crowd remained silent, absorbing the unexpected turn, the reversal of expectations that none had seen coming. For Ryan, the announcement was both an end and a beginning. The ridicule, the whispers, the moments of shame, they hadn't mattered in the grand scheme, and yet they had led to this moment, a turning point that would redefine the night, the family, and the perception of who he truly was. The audience, if watching, could feel the shift. The tide was turning, and nothing would ever be the same. The room froze. Every eye was fixed on Ryan, as if the world had tilted on its axis. The whispers, the laughter, the mocking glances, all vanished into stunned silence. Ryan felt his heart thumping loudly, disbelief mingling with a strange thrill. The same family who had laughed at him, mocked his clothes, and questioned his worth was now staring in shock. He was no longer invisible. The cousins who had teased him the hardest were pale, their mouths slightly open, searching for words. Aunt Margaret clutched her pearls, her expression frozen between surprise and shame. Even the arrogant uncle's smirk had vanished, replaced by a tight, uncertain grimace. Ryan could feel the weight of every gaze, the judgment now reversed. The irony was almost delicious, though he barely allowed himself a smile. He stood taller, trying to process it himself. For years he had been overlooked, dismissed and ridiculed. Now the world had shifted in a heartbeat. The grandfather S words echoed in his mind. Ryan embodies the values and kindness of his father. He is the heir. Every syllable felt like a vindication, a validation of every moment he had endured silently. Some relatives attempted awkward congratulations, their voices faltering. "Congratulations, Ryan," one cousin stammered, eyes darting away. Ryan nodded, polite but distant, sensing the insincerity. The warmth of their words was absent. What lingered was the embarrassment of realizing they had underestimated him for so long. The shift in the room was palpable, a quiet tension that replaced the previous laughter. Clara stood nearby, her eyes shining with pride. Ryan caught her gaze and felt a flicker of reassurance and companionship. She had seen him, believed in him, and now the family could no longer ignore his worth. The moment was electric, charged with revelation, with the quiet justice of someone finally recognized for who he truly was. Ryan's hands rested lightly at his sides, his jaw set. He didn't need to shout or brag or demand respect. It came naturally now, because the truth had been revealed. He had endured the humiliation, the judgment, and now the recognition was undeniable. The family could no longer shape his reality. The tables had turned completely. A hush lingered as he slowly surveyed the room, reading every expression: shock, guilt, embarrassment, awe. Their laughter and teasing had been replaced by silence, thick and heavy, a tangible reflection of their sudden awareness. Ryan felt a strange calm amidst the chaos, a quiet triumph that required no words. For the first time that night, Ryan smiled fully, not forced or shy, but genuine. He was finally seen, acknowledged, and the air of superiority that had once weighed so heavily on him had evaporated. In that moment, the shy boy who entered the party felt a spark of something stronger: confidence, dignity, and the quiet knowledge that his worth had always been more than anyone could imagine. The room felt frozen, as if the air itself had stopped moving. Every family member who had mocked Ryan now stood in stunned silence, their faces pale, their mouths slightly agape. The laughter that had once filled the room was gone, replaced by the weight of disbelief and sudden shame. Ryan felt their eyes on him, heavy with regret, and for the first time, the balance of power had shifted completely. Even the cousins who had been the loudest, pointing and laughing earlier, now looked like children caught in the act. Their smirks were gone, replaced by tension, unease, and the realization that they had misjudged him entirely. One of them shifted awkwardly, trying to find words, but no words came. Ryan's calm gaze seemed to fill the room, a quiet force that demanded recognition. Aunts and uncles exchanged glances, their expressions a mixture of guilt and surprise. I didn't know," one whispered under her breath, voice trembling. Ryan heard, but he didn't respond. There was no need. The silence itself was louder than any reply he could give. Each guilty look, each hesitant step, spoke volumes. The room, once full of ridicule, had transformed into a space of stunned awareness. Ryan felt the tension stretch, thick and electric. The family who had looked down on him now avoided his gaze, ashamed of their previous behavior. The mocking uncle tried to clear his throat, but the sound seemed hollow in the sudden quiet. For the first time that night, Ryan felt entirely in control, not because of arrogance, but because truth and patience had shifted the perception of everyone around him. Clara's presence remained a quiet comfort. She smiled softly, her pride evident. Her support, unwavering all night, had helped him reach this moment. Ryan looked at her briefly, a subtle nod passing between them. They both knew this silence wasn't just about embarrassment. It was about recognition, about justice served in a way that required no vindictiveness, only truth. Every laugh, every cruel comment from earlier now echoed in their minds, twisted into shame. Ryan's composed demeanor, his quiet confidence, was a mirror reflecting back the realization that he had been underestimated. The room no longer held mockery. It held reflection, and in that reflection, Ryan saw his own strength amplified, serene and undeniable. Even the youngest cousins, who had giggled at his every movement, fell silent. Their eyes lowered, unsure how to behave now that the tables had turned. Ryan observed them, not with malice, but with a quiet dignity. The lesson was clear. Respect isn't given based on appearance, humor, or status. It's earned by staying true to oneself. As the moment stretched, the silence became a testament to the shift that had occurred. The room that had once ridiculed him now held a heavy, almost reverent quiet. Ryan breathed deeply, absorbing the moment, feeling the final weight of judgment lifted from his shoulders. He understood fully that patience, courage, and integrity had won, and that from this point on, nothing would diminish his worth again. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted. The same relatives who had mocked Ryan all night now tried to approach him, offering awkward compliments and forced smiles. "Well, congratulations, Ryan," one cousin said, fumbling with her words. Another uncle nodded, hesitant, as if trying to prove he could still be part of this new reality. Ryan, however, stayed calm, his expression serene, showing that he didn't need their approval to feel strong. He listened politely, nodding slightly, but didn't let their words change his posture or his mood. The shift in their behavior was almost amusing. They were trying to catch up to a respect they had denied him all evening. Ryan realized that dignity wasn't about proving anything to them. It was about standing firm, staying true to himself, and letting the recognition come naturally, not forced. Clara watched nearby, smiling softly, proud of the way Ryan handled the sudden change. He had endured ridicule, humiliation, and doubt, and now, with the roles reversed, he didn't flaunt his newfound status. Instead, he remained composed, a quiet reminder that true strength is silent, measured, and patient. The family's scramble for attention only highlighted the contrast between their shallow concern and his inner resilience. A few relatives tried to get closer, making small talk, praising his work ethic or his patience. Ryan nodded again, acknowledging them without needing their validation. His calmness was magnetic. It shifted the room subtly, creating a space where respect no longer depended on wealth or mockery. For the first time, the family felt the power of humility and integrity, reflected in the very person they had underestimated. The cousin who had laughed the loudest earlier approached with a nervous smile. "I, never realized," she started, her voice wavering. Ryan tilted his head slightly, listening without judgment. He didn't need to point out the irony, didn't need to highlight their past behavior. The truth had already spoken for itself, and their shame was evident enough. As the night continued, more attempts at reconciliation came, but Ryan's demeanor remained unchanged. His confidence wasn't loud or flashy, it was steady, calm, and undeniably present. He knew that money or status weren't what gave him power. It was his patience, his strength of character, and his refusal to let others define his worth. The room was learning slowly what he had known all along. Even the uncles and aunts who had dismissed him initially couldn't hide their awkwardness. Their attempts at friendliness were tinged with guilt, their smiles tight. Ryan, however, responded with grace, showing that he could accept courtesy without bitterness, but also without needing to indulge in sincerity. His dignity was his shield, and it radiated quietly but powerfully through the entire room. By the end of the evening, the turnabout was clear. Ryan had transformed the energy of the party without raising his voice, without demanding attention. The ridicule had ended, replaced by respect, however grudging it might be. And as he looked around, a quiet sense of triumph settled in his chest, not because he had wealth now, but because he had emerged whole, dignified, and unwavering, proving silently that patience, courage, and integrity always win in the end. Ryan walked out of the party with Clara by his side, the night air cool against his skin. The mansion behind him glittered in the distance, full of the whispers, laughter, and drama that no longer had power over him. For the first time he felt light, unburdened, and fully himself. The ordeal inside had tested him, but he had emerged stronger, wiser, and dignified. He glanced at Clara, who smiled encouragingly. "You handled that perfectly," she said softly. Ryan nodded, a faint smile crossing his face. He realized it wasn't just about the fortune or even the family's recognition. It was about surviving, enduring, and proving to himself that he was capable of standing tall no matter the circumstances. The night was calm, the city lights twinkling in the distance. Ryan breathed deeply, savoring the moment. The laughter, the mockery, and the whispers had faded into memory, replaced by a quiet sense of victory. He hadn't needed to shout, argue, or demand respect. His patience, integrity, and courage had spoken for themselves, louder than any insult ever could. In his mind, he replayed the moments of the evening, the challenges, the teasing, the whispers of doubt. Each memory now felt like a stepping stone rather than a burden. The family's surprise and eventual respect were satisfying, yes, but the real triumph was internal. He had maintained his dignity, stayed true to himself, and let the truth reveal his worth naturally. Clara nudged him gently. "Ready to go home?" she asked. Ryan smiled fully this time. "Yeah, let's go." They walked together, side by side, leaving the mansion and its drama behind. Every step felt lighter, every breath freer. For Ryan, the night had been a lesson in resilience, courage, and the quiet power of self-respect. As they disappeared into the night, the voice of a narrator seemed to linger. Never underestimate someone whose strength hasn't been revealed yet. The words echoed the truth of the evening, that humility, patience, and integrity can withstand mockery, endure trials, and ultimately turn the tide of any situation. Ryan felt a sense of peace he hadn't known before. The party, the ridicule, the jealousy, all of it was over, replaced by clarity. He knew now that life wasn't about proving himself to others, but about staying true, even when no one was watching. And tonight, he had done just that. With a quiet, satisfied smile, he stepped forward into the night, leaving the past behind. The city stretched ahead, full of possibilities, and Ryan knew he was ready for whatever came next. The party was over, but his journey had just begun. A journey of courage, dignity, and the quiet strength of a heart that had weathered the storm and emerged victorious.